So, welcome to Jolty. Today, Faith and I are delighted to be joined in just a few minutes by Michele Evans, who really is a fabulous woman who's done great things in HR, chief people officer role in some major corporations. You'll hear she actually decided how much of a bonus Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer got, which is sort of a lot of power to wield. And now she's running a company called NxtWaves, which is a really timely concept, which is helping executives between, let's say, 40 and 60 discover, find, and become more self-aware of what they want to accomplish in their next roles. And she creates these wonderful circles and a safe space where people could come and expose and express themselves and really get in touch with what they're looking for in a way that probably they never did before if they were on one straight career track. So should be a great conversation. And Faith is friends with her and has brought her onto the show. So without further ado, Faith, why don't you say
Yeah.
a few words and then we'll bring her on.
Yeah, you'll see, she redefines what it means not to be a human resource person, but for me, she redefines what it means to be human in a large enterprise. She's beautiful. You'll see.
She's human and a resource, which is different than
Yes,
human resource.
and gorgeous, and warm, and kind.
Yes.
I'm really excited to welcome Michele Evans to Jolty. She is the essence of Jolty. She has a company now called NxtWaves, which she's going to tell you about. She'll do a better job than I. But here's her very wild background. She was HR for Meta, and we can say no more about that, and Microsoft. So she's had quite a few experiences in her life. She's an extremely authentic person, and she's somebody I trusted the first minute I met her. And for those of you who know me, that's saying a lot. So I'm just thrilled you're here, Michele, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us what the vision is for why you would open Next Waves, why you started your own company, why you're not working for one of those big ones.
Sure.
Yeah, talk to us.
Yeah. I'll go way back in my career for a minute and
Okay,
talk about when
good.
I went to school. And I was actually going to be a math major. And I got to my junior year of college and I looked around and I was the last woman in the class. I was like, man, these are not people I want to be working with. Like, no offense to the actuaries out there, but I was like, I got to make a pivot. And so I ended up going into business. But since then I've had a very analytical career, and I started off in compensation. I had some roles, and then I started in 2000 at Microsoft, where I did executive compensation. And during that time, I even got to work on Bill Gates' bonus, which was pretty fun,
Cool.
and Steve Ballmer's bonus. And then I pivoted into international compensation, and I led compensation for Latin America at Microsoft for 4 years, spent a ton of time in Latin America. And then I moved to Singapore and I was the head of compensation and benefits for Asia for a couple years. And then I went into a variety of HR roles. I was in the office of the COO for a while doing HR in his office. And then I ended up leading HR for ads at Microsoft. So a very dynamic part of the business. MSN, Bing, Skype, some big brands that aren't so big anymore. So a lot of headwinds and a lot of challenging times. And at that time, we were going through layers after layers of layoffs. And I was sitting across the table from these really accomplished professionals and was just seeing the devastation as their jobs were eliminated. And I was like, this is deeper than money. This really is hitting at their identity and their relationships and where they're going to be on Monday. And there's a lot here. And I was shocked at how little resources there were to help people really plan for, hey, what do I do next? Or what does my career look like as I'm, in my 40s and 50s and 60s? And what am I going to do? And I was like, I feel like this is something that an area where I can make a difference. And in the meantime, I was recruited to Facebook to lead HR for global sales. It was Facebook at the time. And I moved to New York and was the head of HR for global sales for the last 6 years. An amazing experience. I'm very grateful for that time. But I knew that this was something that I wanted to pursue. And I had drafted a manuscript of a book. I had clients here and there, but that meant that I had to get my contract in order. I had to have an LLC. So I was putting in place the foundation for my next chapter, and decided that 2022 would be the year. So I have founded NxtWaves, which is all about helping accomplished professionals figure out with intentionality their next phase of life and work. And we're helping primarily executives that are C-suite or director or VPs, and they have typically about 20 years of experience, and they feel like they just need to pause and reflect and think about, like, what can I do next? How can I continue to give back and really contribute? And I heard recently a statistic that more people are afraid of irrelevancy than they are of death. And I think that with that in mind, people really do need to plan for how to continue to contribute. And this means, taking time to reflect and bounce things off of their peers and really get out of autopilot and think differently about their future. So that's what I'm doing and have been doing for the last 5 months. And it's going great.
Well, wow. That's all, Michele? How old are you? 80? Michelle's 80. We just wanted to share that with you. No, she's quite young. So we were wondering about this flexible work. I know one of the first conversations I ever had with Michele was, do you really think you can manage people that are not together? Because this is what I saw this morning, an enormous drug company. Go in there, everybody's like, and they had a little snow. So they were so like, oh, maybe we don't have to come in at all for this big meeting, And they came in and everybody's going, I don't know why I'm here. I hate being here. I don't get it. There's no reason to come to the office, but you think differently. You think you can make people happy in this new model. So tell us.
Well, first of all, I don't think companies are going to have a choice.
Well, that's true. That's true.
I just think that I liken it to casual Fridays and how companies might have been reluctant at the beginning to have casual Fridays and then to allow jeans at work. And then it got to the point where some companies didn't get on board with that. And that's fine, their culture or whatever, but it's going to limit their talent pool. And I just think more and more companies aren't going to have the luxury of limiting their talent pool. They're going to want to cast as wide of a net as possible in order to get the best talent. And remote work is definitely going to be at the top of the list of what people continue to want. So, but the companies that start preparing for this now, they're going to have a competitive advantage because, first of all, it's going to require technology. The technology's there, but you just have to invest in it. When Faith and I were talking, I was like, the metaverse is going to change this. I've been in leadership team meetings in Horizon Worlds, and it's a different kind of experience. You are there with people. You feel present when they're talking in a way where you're like, we're together. And that's one example, but just all of the other tools that we have at our fingertips, Slack and Zoom and everything. But you have to be conscious and you have to make that shift. And so the earlier you get on board, the better. I also think that the culture is going to be really important. So what does an open door policy mean in a remote setting? And defining that and having managers that can define it for themselves and their teams and lean into that sort of communication is going to be key. And the companies that do it, they're going to be ahead of the curve and they're going to be ready when the talent market gets even tighter and tighter. And next thing you know, if they want the best, that's what it's going to be a requirement. So that's how I think about it. And the other thing is, like, you got to have fun, work. I always think that one of the unsung benefits of work is it can be really fun. And so again, but you gotta, if you're in a remote setting, how do you have fun in a remote setting? And you can do it. You just got to be intentional about it.
Right.
Addie, you had something?
How much fun can you have on Zoom, though, versus in person? I think there's a certain human connection that happens when you're sitting next to somebody. And even though you shouldn't in a meeting tell somebody something over here, I think there's a formality. And the metaverse could change that because it'll be more fluid. But I think there's a formality
Right.
in Zoom that mitigates humor, fun.
Mm.
The sidebars, it goes back to when we sat in school next to somebody and we built
Yeah.
relationships that way. So I guess we'll figure it out, but it seems like, what do you think?
I mean, I'm having fun right now talking to you guys.
Aw.
You know?
Well, we're
I mean,
special.
Yeah.
but yeah, you are special. But I mean, would I be having more fun if we were together?
Yes, because we'd be drinking.
Probably.
Or I
The
wouldn't be
key is
drinking. I
alcohol.
wouldn't be drinking alone like I am now. Uh,
But the short answer, Adam, I think you can have fun over Zoom.
you do?
I really do. And is it as fun? I don't know. But then you have to be mindful about when you bring people together. And when you do bring people together, it can't be all work, at
Yeah.
that point. Then I think you got to make sure that you're having fun.
Well, that's a great point because, those few days that you're in the office is so condensed now that it's sort of a double-edged sword. You're with people, but you're overprogrammed at the same time.
Yeah.
So, what about this group that you have that wants to reinvent themselves after 50, 60? I thought it was interesting because they are all successful. They look kind of wealthy. So, how are you going to help them figure this out? And why can't they figure this out themselves?
Well, first of all, I would take a step back and look at the macro trends of what's happening with our workforce. And if you're 50 today, the experts would say there's a very high likelihood you're going to live to be 115.
Wow.
And at the same time, the way the demographics are shifting, we're looking at the population in 1950, it was 8% of the population was over 60. In 2000, it was 12%. And in 2030, it's going to be over 30% of the population is 60 plus. So with this kind of a shift that's happening, and then you layer on talent shortages, not only are people going to want to work, they're going to have to work, and companies are going to need them. So there's going to be the supply and demand situation where people are going to be able to choose what kind of work they want to do later in life. But they're going to have to be clear on what that is. And so what we do is we talk about the Stoics, and we talk about our mortality. We're all reading right now on The Shortness of Life by Seneca, and discussing, what does it mean? Is life long or is life short? What does that mean? Are you stingy with your time, or do you give away your time too freely? And then we talk about our values, and we talk about our strengths. And in a perfect world, you're lining up your values and your strengths with your work you're doing. And if you are, the likelihood that you're going to be fulfilled in your work is very high. But you have to know what those are first. And that's the sort of thing that we're doing, is allowing the time in this always on culture for people to stop and reflect and discuss these important things. And from there, they can put in place a roadmap for what they're going to do next, knowing they're going to have options. Because for these individuals, these accomplished individuals, it's not that they're going to have nothing to do. And so they need to know what they want and what they're good at in order to make good decisions about their work and their life.
I was going to ask you about these sessions where you kind of look inwardly at what your goals, aspirations are, line that up with your talents. Do these happen individually, or are they small groups? Are they online? Are they in person? What does it look like?
All on Zoom. And we're having fun. And we're putting together mastermind circles that are typically 6 people. We haven't gone beyond that yet, but we think we could maybe get up to 10 and have the same experience. And then they're facilitated by master facilitators. And there's homework that happens, peer coaching that happens, and then people come together once a month for these circle conversations. And that's where they're able to discuss and reflect kind of together. And it's interesting because we have a lot of men signing up for these circles. I would have thought it would be a little bit heavier to women. Now, it might be because a lot of the people that are in our circles are from tech, and especially in executive positions, we know that those are typically men. But I also think that this is an opportunity for men to come together and talk about something that is, they can be vulnerable, but they're talking about their careers. So it's something that they feel very confident in speaking about. So it's an interesting situation that we're seeing right now.
So, well, I was going to ask you about that. Is there something about living so long, if we're going to live that long, so then children aren't going to be a problem? Because people are distracted by their children, and or are they or are these people going to take on their grandchildren, or are they going to have new families with children, or what do you see for family
No,
formation?
I I actually said something a little bit different,
Okay.
which is, and I don't know if this answers your question, Faith, but I think that if you think about people in their 30s and 40s, that at least I see a lot of times are overwhelmed with their families and their children and maybe aging parents, and there's a lot going on. And then they're also like feeling this pressure to have this thriving career. Well, if you're going to be working until you're 60 or 70 or 80, like maybe that's a good time to take a break for a year or two and kind of get off of the career path and focus on other things, or maybe again put in place like a side hustle or a business or something like that. And then when the kids are out of the house, now, hey, this is a pretty good time to now double down and really start working on your career again. That's one thing that I think a lot about when I think about families and work and how they come together. But to your point, I know people that, I mean, we all know people in their 40s, early 50s that are having babies. And it's definitely is a different type of career and life than we saw 20 years ago. And so that's going to change, I think, how people are willing to work as well. You know, the statistics today are that 1/3 of Gen X have a side hustle.
Mhm.
2/3 of Gen Z and millennials have side hustles. So right now, freelancers, all of that are becoming more and more prevalent. I think we're going to see similar trends happen to people that are 50, 60 plus, where it's not that they're going to want to have a traditional role at a company, but rather they're going to have a portfolio of career opportunities that they're working on at the same time. And they have different forms of work that they're doing during
Right.
that time.
Somebody who's 50 is sort of in a transitional mode. They started their career probably in a world when you had a very straight path, you had a couple of jobs, you moved up the ladder.
Right.
Now they're looking around at their kids and what's happening, and the world has become a side hustle. So I would
Yeah,
think that you're finding there's some mental reset that has to happen in order for them to let go of what they thought a career was and embrace this much more multidimensional, sort of Richard Florida creative class world.
absolutely. And if you think about it, if you're 50, let's say you started working when you were 22 or 24 or 26. Think of everything you did to start working. You know, you went to school, you had an internship, you had career fairs, you had mentors, you had sponsors, you had career paths, you had all of this that went into determining what you were going to do and how you were going to progress in your career. Well, if we live to be 100, if we live to be 110 and we work until we're in our 80s or 90s, you're looking at, 30, 40, 50 years there of what are you going to do with your time? And we don't have anything, for people to really plan for such a career in life, where
Right.
it's very likely that that period is longer than their career to date,
Right.
where they did all of that investment. And that's the gap that we're trying to fill at NxtWaves.
Are they going to stay married to that same person that was in their beginning career?
I feel like this is more your area than mine, Faith. What do you
Okay,
think?
I'll answer myself. No, uh, no, they're not. I mean, I think they're going to have 2 and 3, 4 family formations, or maybe the yearn to be single for like 10 years, and then, I mean, if you think you're going to live to 120, it's it's daunting. I mean, or it's
Yeah.
fabulous. I don't know. If you're healthy, it's fabulous. And I think a lot of us will be healthy. So I love the idea that you're starting people at 60. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's just just great. Are companies accepting them, Michelle? Or is this a future thing
So,
when they feel like
yeah,
they're desperate, then they'll take somebody who's 60?
we have, well, first of all, our clients are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, heavily weighted towards their 50s. Um, and I would say, in my vision, we would go beyond that. People in their 30s and 70s. But desperation isn't the word I would use to describe these people. I would say it's more around recognizing a need that they have, worry that's gnawing at them about what they're going to do, and they don't have a plan on paper. And these are the sort of people that like to have a plan on paper. But desperate isn't the word I would use at all. Um, but I love that you asked that question.
If to your earlier point, relevance is what they fear more than death, then
Yes,
what they're feeling is frightened, fear
fear,
of becoming irrelevant, which
exactly.
is different than
Fear.
desperation. Yeah, fear, I would think, is probably the operating emotion.
Okay, fear. But not if they have a work plan.
No, that's her point. That's what Michelle's trying to do, which is to reinvent the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how will companies accept them? Will companies really?
Well, yeah, they're not going to have a choice.
That's what I meant by desperate. They're going to be desperate for talent that they're not going to
Of the
care.
employer side.
Yeah, on the employer
On the
side.
employee. Yeah, they're not going to have a choice, and they're going to have to get on board. Right now, I hate to say it, but there's policies in place at a lot of companies out there to push people out. But again, when back in 2000, when only 12% of the population was over 60, that made sense. But that's not going to make sense with that number is doubled. And at the same time, when they're desperate for great talent, and they're going to want talent that has seen patterns, they're going to want talent that has some wisdom and has been there, done that. And so there will be no other choice than to plug in the labor shortages than looking at older
It
workers.
has to be a major employer reset, because I'll tell you what I've seen, and maybe you guys have seen it too, is anybody who's over 50 who
Useless.
useless. You
Yeah.
can't even get someone to answer your email. And you're right, obviously it's your world. People are getting fired at 48 or 39 to hire somebody who's 25 and will work twice as long for half the money. So what kind of gap are we going to see before the economic pressures are so great that the 53-year-old guy actually could have a job that's gratifying and rewarding? Because right now they can't get hired.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see the companies that do this first, because my prediction is that it won't be the companies that are typically leading edge when it comes to employee experience. I don't think tech's going to lead the way on this one. I wish they would, but my gut says it's going to be. I mean, the companies that are smart will be like consumer good companies that understand the shift that is also happening with spending power, because we're about ready to see this massive shift in not only the demographics but also the spending power of people that are over 60. So really understanding that demographic and having employees that mirror that demographic will be a competitive advantage. So my prediction is that might be some of the companies that end up going first, maybe the publishing world, that sort of thing. But pretty soon, I just don't think that they're going to have any company is really going to have an option.
Plus, if you're going to meet in the metaverse, you can look great.
Holy, yes,
Look,
your avatar is going to be rocking.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, who cares? How old you are, and I hope that the metaverse ends up being an equalizer when it comes to not only ageism but also, racism and all the other issues we have around underrepresented minorities and gender and all the preconceived notions that go with that. Wouldn't that be wonderful if that's something that comes out of the metaverse?
It definitely would. Yeah, it would.
I mean, what do you think the impact of AI and as we're seeing now will be? What kind of jobs will be the first to be replaced? And then maybe your point about older people who could see patterns, have better dot recognition capabilities, will be more in demand, and areas like maybe law and consulting that are not as easily replaced by AI will be safe places for them.
Yeah, it seems like the roles that require relationships, that require finesse, coaching, that require, influence, I continue to think those are going to be really important roles. I always joke HR, like, no robot's doing HR's job, too complicated. You're dealing with people, everything like that. But what I do think, and I think, Faith, I think you have the same thought about this, but no matter what role you're doing, if you aren't embracing AI, you're going to be left behind because, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to be a super lawyer if you're using AI.
Yeah.
You're going to be a super HR professional if you're using AI. And I'm personally using it every day.
Tell us what you're using.
Oh my gosh. I'll use it. I'll write a fast email, faster than I've ever written in the past, throw it in OpenAI, rewrite this email better, comes back with something that I'm able to immediately send out. So my email alone is probably 10 times faster than it used to be, which is nice. It's so nice.
Yeah.
I always want to waste the time. Oh my God, all this wordsmithing. And so I'm using it for that. I mean, even like how verbiage on our website, client communications for sure. I used it recently. I actually used it. I tried to use it for a legal letter, and I plugged in, here's the scenario. I'd like to have some legalese in it. And then I got it over to my lawyer. And I think he took it as like a threat, like, no robot's going to do my job. And he responded with the most eloquent legal letter I've ever seen, and I was like, oh, this is one for the fridge. Like, good job, Dennis, But
I was just going to say, I would do the same thing if you sent me the Chat GPT version of your website copy.
Yeah, right? Like,
I'd send
I'm going to step it up.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if I have to step it up, but
that's for people who are really talented. They're going to want, it's a game now, to outdo it.
Yes.
But for most, like you in HR, you have to fill out 8 million things, right? Surveys and things. And if ChatGPT could do all that, that would be fantastic. The part you can do 100%. Is how to think through people problems or people opportunities. I think it's great. And don't ever tell anybody that AI did it. I mean, you immediately want to destroy it once you know AI did it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like keep it under. That can be your secret.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's really sexy.
So in your model, Michele, you have these circles, and a trained facilitator runs them. Is the scalable model like Marie Kondo, where people will be trained by you and then go off and do it on their own, and then you could incrementalize it?
Yeah. Great point. Where the facilitators are going to be very important, and we have like standard facilitators.
I want to know about that. What is that?
Yes, I didn't know this role existed until we started this company. There are master facilitators out there that facilitate like a board retreat. So you can hire a master facilitator. Hey, we're going to, Jackson Hole for 3 days, and we need someone to facilitate our board meeting. And you can hire someone to do this. They charge anywhere from $150 to $500 an hour, and they're pros at reading the room, knowing when to let someone talk longer, knowing how to elegantly cut someone off, knowing where, they're onto something here. Let's let them, let's throw the agenda out the window for a minute and let them keep going here. And so those are the people that we're hiring to facilitate these circles.
Where can we find them for our group?
There's companies out there that do this, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But if you type in like facilitation, that's how we found out about this. Yeah, we just did a Google search. Can you hire these roles? The next thing you know, we're like, hey, what do you know? This whole industry we didn't know existed. So yes, you can actually do that. But then we have professional coaches. So coaches are different than facilitators. Sometimes they go hand in hand, but coaches are actually then available one-on-one for individuals that want to have specific coaching for them. We're in an hour-long session they can talk about privately, where, and the sort of things that we always talk about, I'm a professional coach, would be what's holding you back? What are stories you're telling yourself that are no longer serving you? What are you afraid of? What would you do if you weren't afraid? those sort of powerful questions then help people figure out what they're going to do next. And in a purist world, a coach would never give advice. They would only ask the powerful questions so people can reflect and figure it out on their own. But I always say, 10% of the time I'm going to give you my advice because I can't help it. The other 90% I'll try to
That's very
ask you questions.
I was going to say what you're doing is a bit of sort of group therapy meets life coach.
We're always really clear that we aren't therapists because that's a medical field, and with that involves diagnosis, and so for sure we don't creep into that area. And in fact, we'll put into our agreements, if it gets to the point where we think that there's something deeper here, we would encourage you to go get a professional therapist. It's really about like a coach, and I always liken it to a sports coach. If you're the sort of person that is playing tennis and you want to up your game, you're probably already really good at tennis. And if you're going to get a private coach, you just are going from great to exceptional. And those seem to be the sort of professionals that we're attracting as well. They're already very accomplished. They're just looking to take it to the next level.
Interesting. So how big could your company be?
Well, we have a long-range plan that has some pretty aggressive goals. And I mean, I want to be humble. I mean, we've been around for a few months. We're definitely early stage. But, it is a scalable model when you think about the fact that you could have these circles and facilitators, and the facilitators are responsible for the scheduling and everything like that. It could work where you could get pretty big. There's a company called Chief. I don't know if you've heard of Chief. Sure. They're based here in New York City. They actually have a similar model as far as mastermind circles go. And Chief is known for having a wait list of, I think, 60,000 people on their wait list that are waiting.
What does Chief do, just for the audience?
Chief is, and I hope I get this right because I really respect this company, they are looking to empower women that are in the C-suite, by empowering them and having them stay in the C-suite, which is really important. I mean, we exchanged emails this morning about the number of women that are leaving the workforce. And so they're really determined to help women get to the C-suite and stay there. And so they are putting together these circles. And so it's not a dissimilar model to what we're doing.
Why do you think women fade away like that? 3%, am I right, of the Fortune 500 are run by women? 3%? CEOs?
I don't know the statistics. Yeah. But that's probably something right. Yeah.
What's wrong?
We have a long ways to go, don't we?
What's wrong?
So much of it, I think you have to be intentional as a company to bring senior women into the company. If you leave it to just the normal practices, it's going to be very difficult.
Right.
And so you have to do all the right things. So what are the right things? And we did this at Facebook. We did at Meta. We did diverse slates. So we would not go to interview until we had, for example, 2 women in a director level or above slate. And they had to be qualified candidates. And from there, we would say, even playing field, hire the best candidate. Absolutely. But if you had 2 qualified women in there, the odds were a lot better that you were going to hire a woman. But that took a lot of intentionality, and it took a lot of discipline, because we've all been in that situation where you have an open role. You're like, I just need it filled today. I have this guy, that I went to school with. I know him. He's a good guy. Like, hire him. And you have a recruiter telling you, actually, we have to meet our diverse slate requirements. So we need to go out and find 2 women that are qualified. And, now it starts to feel like check the box. And so you can imagine these conversations that are happening behind the scenes all over the place, especially if you're in the year 2020, 2021, you have all these pressures that are going on when it comes to business challenges and opportunities at the same time for growth, and you're just wanting to move. So I think that that's a big challenge. I think the way we work is not sustainable.
Talk more about that, because That's true for men too, but they don't realize it till they have their first heart attack. But talk about that.
It used to be when I started off in tech in, the 90s, you didn't even have a laptop that you took home. You might have like one loaner laptop for your group, So you would go home and you would be off work. And then it started to be, okay, you had your laptop, now you're available. Next thing you know, you have your phone, then you have Messenger. And as much as I love my time at Facebook, it got to the point it was out of control. I mean, people would ping me on work messenger, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, normal text, email, personal email. And at one point, like, I was getting pinged on Instagram Messenger for work. I was, it's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much. I can't be all over the place.
But was it the same message or different messages?
Just different people had different styles, oh, I'm, whoever the Instagram messenger was, it's like, okay, dude, like, let's keep this fun, let's not bring work into this. But it's too much, and the statistics on once you get distracted, it's 20 minutes to get refocused.
Yeah.
It's not a good way to work. And so I think that you layer on all of that, the internal needs that people feel to be valuable, to be responsive, even if their boss has no indication that they should be replying within minutes. I think people put that on themselves. I just think, it's a lot. And then you layer on the recent layoffs that are happening across the tech industry, and people are expected to do more with less support around them. It's a lot. And if you've been managing everything that's been going on outside of work with the pandemic, which we all know it's been a lot as well, at some point it's like, maybe it is time to take a break, or maybe it is time to start my own business, or maybe it is time to, go to a smaller company where I feel like I can make more of an impact and not work as many hours. There's just, and people have options. That's the other thing. They have options.
And a lot of the hours are wasted. I mean, they're in meetings trying to like bang out somebody's hierarchical structure,
Bullshit
be heard.
meetings.
Yeah, bullshit meetings.
Yeah.
Bullshit meetings. I love the whole, like, this could have been a 7-minute discussion instead of an hour.
Yeah.
How many of those meetings have we been in?
Yeah, a lot.
So do you think, you talked about in terms of letting people in their 50s and beyond back in a meaningful way? You said tech probably won't leave, because I assume because of the youth culture, but maybe you have some other thoughts. And CPG, and I think you said publishing are more likely to. Someone who spent so many years in tech, do you think that we're going to see some convergence, that tech will learn from more mature legacy industries, and legacy industries, well, they've been trying desperately to become more like tech, and somewhere we'll find the golden middle?
I think so. I think that's a really good way to put it, Adam. I like that a lot. I think there's such a focus, for really good reason, on underrepresented minorities, female in tech, and just like anything else, when you prioritize, important things are going to go on the back burner. And I think age right now is just not on the radar. And I think that it will get there. I think it's just going to take a little while. But, I think about the number of people that are 60 plus on even the Facebook. Let's talk about, on Facebook.
Right.
It would be interesting if we had more people working on the product that were older, because I do think that there would be a little bit more focus on the design for people that are at that age bracket. And I think that we will get to the point where that's something that will be top of mind.
And it's so interesting because people say, I want to phase Facebook out because for older people. You know what I mean?
Right.
And yet, if that's true, or older people, it's not so hard to maneuver. Maybe that's it, or whatever. They certainly don't try to attract or get older. So youth is still the cream of. We're still looking for a youth market, just like we're still marketing to traditional families, which are 23% of families, which is so crazy. How long does it take us to catch up with what's just happening? Not even the future.
Oh, so true.
And I'll tell you why I can tell you why I think, and Adam is a great feminist, so he can add, but women don't make it in these companies because these companies, I know you're putting it in extremely polite language, Michelle, that you learned at these big companies. But the reason I never worked at a big company is because I'm not so good at that. But the reason that women can't survive in these big companies is because they are brutal. They are insulting, not only to women, to each other. They are immoral, many of them. They fire people at Christmas, basics, you know. They there's just no empathy in the, you know, in the, I don't know, in their credo, if you want to say. And women lead with empathy, and, you know, and women don't need credit for this, you know. They work in groups, they work in hives, they that's why. I mean, and the smartest thing I tell women that they can do, and maybe I'm just going to get a whole bunch of Instagram messages, is that they should start their own thing. They're not going to change these companies. They're not going to fit in these companies. They're not going to make it in these companies. And actually, the companies will fade, but another form, you know, will rise. And I'm not saying that of a defeatist point of view. I'm saying, who would want to work when you're constantly being hurt? Actually, you're being hurt. Your heart is being hurt. And I'm not going to quote you. You know, we've had a lot of talks about this, but you know, just I mean, just your friend just got laid off, or you have to be in charge of layoffs,
Yeah.
or you know,
Yeah.
that dumb thing where they say, you know, you're going to pick up your kid at kindergarten. Everybody's like, oh, come on, really? You're leaving now? I mean, now they don't say it, but you are punished for it. They've learned not to say it, but they hate you for it.
I mean, I just heard this story of a woman 20 years at one of these tech companies, and I would consider that a pioneer,
Mm-hmm.
founder, laid off by email.
What the emails say?
I don't think it matters. You know, it's classic. Like, people won't remember what you said; they're going to remember how you made them feel,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so I just think, like, it's so insulting. And then the people that are left are like, really? That could happen to me?
It can happen to you.
Of the 100,000 odd people who were let go in tech, the vast majority were fired by email. Getting fired by email is not the exception. And I think, you know, the origin days of tech, and I don't mean origin back to Intel being started out of Fairchild. I'm talking about modern internet. It was seen as, to your point, Faith, a place that had more empathy, that was trying to change the world, that was trying to help people communicate.
Yeah.
Now look where we are. I think these layoffs and the insensitivity around these layoffs is a huge generational setback to tech.
Me too.
It's you know, this was a moment where they could have recaptured some of the essence of the early days, and they've become just like any other big bad industry.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's something that if you're not desperate to pay your mortgage, let's say, or you're not really, you know, in a bad bind, when you see the brutality, you know, man or woman, you go like, I would like to step away from this. And, you know, letting people out of the office and into this 3-day week, this is what I observe. And maybe this is too brutal, but see, they let the prisoners out of jail and they somehow think they're going to come back, and they're not going to come back. And there are more of them than you, and they are definitely not coming back. And when they come in, they go like, I don't know why I'm here. Why am I here? So the even if that model wasn't working that well with all the, you know, injustice and everything, at least people were together. You want to call it water cooler, or they were drunk half the time, or whatever. At least they had each other, and there was something nice. Now there's nothing, and I say we're it's going to show in productivity. It will show.
Yeah. I think for sure we're seeing that right now. The productivity hits. I think that I'm always such an optimist. I can't help it.
I know you
And I think
can't.
that we're at one of those points where the pendulum has swung to the point where, oh, again, hey, operations can lay people off. We don't need a human to do that. And listen, 7, 10 years ago, we never would have done it in email, right?
No.
We would always ensure that it was a human moment. I'm not saying it made people feel better, but it was a human moment and people were treated with respect and dignity. And it was always something that we strove to do in tech. And I just think that the pendulum swung, and I think it's going to swing back again, partly because companies aren't going to have an option. They're going to need it in order to.
I was going to say it's going to swing back and hit them in the head because they're not going to be able to get people to come.
Isn't it a broader social issue? I mean, we've all read about how many relationships are ended with a text, right? Breakup emails, breakup texts. So I think in general, the culture is substituting that form of communication for this form of communication. It's not just firing people by text. It's
that's a good
even
point.
sending, how many times does somebody sorry about your loss on Facebook? 1,000 responses, sorry about your loss. How many of those people pick up the phone and actually make a difference in somebody's life, or they think they're satisfying a social obligation by just saying sorry about your loss? So I think it's more of a global social and cultural issue that is, to your point, I think manifests in a more amplified way in the workforce. But it's a problem. It's a communications flatness that we're having overall, I think.
I like that flatness. Not only is it lazy and awful to say sorry about your loss, but here's something worse. So, you're the optimist, but Addie and I, like, we could pessimize you out of existence.
Well, we could counterbalance you, no problem.
No problem. So this is what it's like. Here's the thing. It's not only that we say, I'm sorry for your loss, condolences, but the person who lost the person are counting out how many people said it. Oh, I got 200.
Yes.
They see value in quantity, and that's really vomit time. I mean,
But I think, so to play the Pollyanna point
again,
of view, I would say that when I hear all this, and it's not that I'm disagreeing, but who is going to rise to the top? Who's going to rise to the top? When you asked earlier about the talent in the world of AI, and I think that it's the leaders with the empathy, the human touch, the ability to listen, the ability to be vulnerable. I think those are the leaders of the future. And we might be in a dark period right now where that isn't the case, but I think that that's going to switch really quickly.
hopefully.
And those are going to be the leaders of the future. And to your earlier point, Faith, I mean, who's better to lead that charge than women?
I'm going to leave it at that. That's gorgeous, Michele.
Right.
Thank you so much for being with us. Isn't she wonderful, Addie? What do you think?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
Great
and we'll
to
all
know
get
you.
together in person, okay?
Yes, but see, I still had fun.
And we'll even out our optimism and pessimism to kind of a general level of
Totally
acceptable responses.
Yes. Oh, this was so great. You
It was
guys.
so great to see you.
Thank
I'll
you
see you very soon. Have a good evening.
Sounds wonderful. Bye.
Bye,
Bye. Thank you
Angel.
for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Adam, an optimist in HR. It's a rare breed. Come on. What do you think about Michele Evans?
I think she's great. I think she paid her dues. She worked at big giant tech companies, managed big giant teams, and now she wants to make a difference in the world by helping this sort of middle generation find their next wave, as she calls the company.
Yeah.
We need it. I just hope that American now and eventually global business is open enough to people who are looking for that change. Because as I said in the interview, it's kind of grim territory for most people in that group looking to get in or get back in.
And that's why I said desperation. They will swallow it because they have to. And that's what it's going to be.
You're absolutely right. And one thing we didn't talk about is what happened to the way the HR works now is all AI. So if you send somebody an email of your resume, it'll look at when you started, when you graduated college, and then if you're too old, they don't like to admit it because they can get sued, but you're not even considered for the job.
It dumps out your resume. That's right. We should have asked her about
Filters
that.
out. Yeah.
I know this about Michele. That layoff thing was just too much. I'm not going to mention companies, but it was just too much for her. Not too much in that she couldn't handle it, too much that she didn't want to be part of it. It's like standing up for who you are. And she decided to, I mean, I think we have to, oh, you know what we could work on, Addie? We have to change the name Human Resources.
It is changed now, basically. They now call it Chief People Officer.
Do you like that?
No,
Okay, why don't you like it?
because it feels like an opportunistic rebranding of human resources.
And it feels like Hallmark, somebody at Hallmark wrote it.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. But
It has to be like something, we'll think of it, but human resources, human. I mean, first of all, that won't be appropriate because it's going to be human robotic resources.
right.
How do we keep the robots happy?
Right.
Yeah, it's completely wrong.
Right.
Anyway, I'm so glad that you liked her. And when I said I trust this woman, you know how I am, Addie. For over 400 years we've been together.
Yes. Yes.
I trust. I looked at her. She is so porous and real and wonderful. So this
Well,
was fun.
she talked about vulnerability in the circles that she creates.
Yeah.
If you're going to create vulnerability, you need to create a safe space where people feel confident in sharing. And she definitely has that vibe.
She's dealing with mostly guys so far. And
Yeah.
these are accomplished men. I was at one of the meetings, with that Sergey guy that's going to lift to 200, which I hope he does because I'll be right there with him. These guys are so open and not competitive, not yelling at each other, not overcoached, nothing. It's what she provides. I don't know. She says it's replicatable. I didn't want to challenge her because I like her so much, but is it replicatable? Are there more Michelles that can create that environment?
There may be more of them than we realize that are waiting to be unleashed.
That's beautiful. Now you're becoming an optimist. I can't believe it. Okay.
Well, for a moment.
All right. Good.
Before Faith and I go, I just want to remind you to subscribe to Jolty, follow us, listen on your podcast platform of choice, tell your friends, make your enemies like you better, and get Jolty out into the world. We thank you.
Yeah. Beam us up, babies. Ciao.
Beam us up. Keep us up.